Hello and welcome to the course of Applied Econometrics. I am Dr. Tutan Ahmed, Assistant Professor, Vinod Gupta School of Management, IIT Kharagpur. To begin this course, let us talk about the core focus of the course. So essentially, what we'll try to learn is that in the first, we will learn basic statistical tools and basic tools to build econometric model to solve problems that we see in the domains of economics and public policy as well as in business. The second aspect of this course would be to actually learn different tools and models and assumptions that we make to do experimental research. Now, experimental research is one emerging area in economics, and we want to sort of give a concrete shape or actually learn the basic tools as well as some advanced tools which are associated with experimental research. The third aspect of this course, and that is somewhat ambitious, is to actually talk about causality. Now, causality is something in economics or in statistics particularly, we often elusively, like it remains elusive. We really don't talk a lot about causality, though in all the different models that we build, we actually want to achieve causality. But because of the elusiveness, because of the difficulty involved in explaining causality, we really do not talk a lot about causality. But in this lecture, I will actually dedicate a whole module to where we will talk about causality. So that's basically going to be the focus of this course. Now, the course modules. So this is our 12-week course, which means it's a 30-hour course, and I will try to divide this 30-hour course into three different modules. Each will have approximately around 10 hours. So in the first module, we will learn the basic statistical tools and standard like econometric modeling that we just spoke about. And the second module, we actually delve deep into econometric modeling, and here again we will talk about the standard econometric modeling, and we will sort of talk about the correlational studies here. We will not really talk about causality or experiments here. But in the third module, we will actually talk about the experiments, and we'll actually try to sort of understand the evolution of causal research, or how people actually try to achieve causality when we have actually built econometric models. Now, let's talk about the learning objectives. So, as I said, we will learn the tools and concepts. Assumptions are really very important in econometric modeling because we are essentially trying to mimic the reality. So, when we do that, we build very simple building blocks, and when we build simple building blocks, we actually need to make a lot of assumptions to sort of build that, and we'll gradually relax them, right? Another very important aspect in learning a course like econometrics is that you should be familiar with the vocabularies involved. Okay, so it has specific vocabularies, and we need to learn as we go along how to talk in the language of an econometrician, right? So for that, we need to be very thorough with the definitions that we actually provide, and what are the limitations, what are the assumptions that we have made. For example, if I talk about say instrumental variable, for example, so we need to know what exactly it means, or what exactly it does not mean, right? So that way we need to familiarize ourselves with different tools and concepts. Okay. Now, when we learn this course, how we'll try to actually understand each of the different concepts that we explain. So first is that we will of course use a lot of mathematical derivation. We'll not use linear algebra considering the broad audience that we have, but we'll do some mathematical derivations. We'll do plenty of graphical illustration because it is always more appealing when you have visuals in front of us, right? And third part is like we'll try to understand intuitively how it makes sense. So we'll try to deploy all these different ways when we try to understand any particular tools or concepts. Okay. Now, as I said previously, that we are actually trying to jump into something called causality, and whereas econometrics is majorly, the tools and models that we use, they actually do a correlational studies. So we will try to build an aptitude to sort of how to interpret correlation and causality. Okay, so that's going to be another objective for the course. We'll use plenty of examples. Examples are always very helpful to understand the concepts and theories in reality. So we'll be using examples. We'll be using data sets. And talking about data sets, of course, we'll be using some programming tools, and we'll be using R. Though I prefer Stata, but I would use R considering it's an open source and its availability to everyone. we also at some point will sort of like try to understand the boundary between machine learning and econometrics. So now machine learning is an emerging field, and there are a lot of similarities, a lot of tools that we econometricians use. They are actually used in machine learning. So it would be helpful for the audience to sort of have some idea about how these two fields are different, or where they have a lot of intersections. Actually, there are a lot of intersections that we'll see, but of course we will not invest too much of energy and attention into that. That requires different focus altogether, but still we will kind of briefly talk about that. The course prerequisites, I would expect that you have some familiarity with basic statistical concepts, so which means that you know what is mean, what is standard deviation, what is covariance, correlation, so on and so forth. But even if you don't know, nothing to worry about it, because I'm actually going to dedicate a first module where we'll talk all these different concepts. Of course, I will probably will not explain like the very basic concepts but what I'll do is when I go along, we'll sort of refer to different materials that you may possibly see to kind of understand in case you don't have the basic understanding. So apart from this basic statistical understanding, I would expect you to have like at least class 12 level maths, or even class 10 level maths, where you have some idea about coordinate geometry. So that is important, and some basic ideas about calculus. Even if you don't have them, like say I'll assume that you have class 10 level maths, you don't have much exposure to coordinate geometry or calculus, but I would assume that you know what is straight line and what is a circle, right? And even then we can actually learn this course. Maybe you need to brush up a little bit, you need to add a little bit here and there in your understanding, so that you are able to familiarize yourself with the different tools and concepts we are going to talk about. And so far as calculus is concerned, we don't need a lot of calculus, perhaps a little bit of idea about maxima, minima, that should be sufficient. And in case you are not familiar with it, we can again just look at like small tutorial video, or just refer to class 12 basic calculus concepts, so that would be sufficient. All right, so now we'll talk about the reference books. I have a long list of reference books. I am sure it is a little scary, but you don't need to be scared. It's just I will be using different textbook for different materials or different concepts that you're going to cover. So it's not that you have to read all the different books. It is only for, say, a few concepts I cover from this book, or few concepts I cover from that book. So let me give you the details of the reference books. For module 1, where we are basically going to talk about basic statistical tools or basic building blocks for econometric modeling. The first book I would prefer is Statistics for Management by Levin et al. Then another book is N.G. Das. So that is by N.G. Das. This is Statistical Methods. I should have written N.G. Das after. The third book is Introduction to Econometrics by Christopher Dougherty. So for this module 1, we will just consider these 3 books, and for Christopher Dougherty's book, we will only need the chapter 1 for the module 1. Now module 2, we will elaborately sort of look into the textbook by Christopher Dougherty, Introduction of Econometrics. We will also use Econometrics by Example by Damodaran in Gujarati. So here in the second module, again we recap, this is basically going to be our standard econometric tools. Now in the third module, where I'm going to talk about causality and experimental and quasi-experimental research, we will use the book Paul Rosenbaum, Observational Study. There is another book, Impact, Evaluation and Practice, published by World Bank. It's freely available. So that book is something that we're also going to use. The third book is Book of Y by Julia Pearl. So that book will basically consult that book to understand the difference between correlation and causality, and that book is specifically dedicated for that. And this is an emerging area, so not everything is written like standard textbooks. Every day people are publishing new papers and new concepts are coming in. So we'll be pretty open to that, and we'll bring in some of the papers on experimental and quasi-experimental research techniques in econometric research. So that's it for the introduction to this course.